Hello and welcome to the GPP NFL podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50, talking about some of your favorite plays for GPP action this week. And obviously, I'm on board with a lot of these guys as well. Probably all of them, really. But starting off at the top, Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady, essentially, if we're talking about salaries, at least on some sites. Tom Brady going to be popular because Tom Brady is popular in real life and fantasy football and real football, whatever. But Aaron Rodgers wasn't quite doing Aaron Rodgers things here for the last couple weeks, but last week finally got back to his dominant self, looked great. I think it was 4 touchdown passes, and now his reward for that performance, you get to face the Lions this week.
Yeah, I mean, to go from facing the Broncos 2 weeks ago to facing the Panthers last week to facing the Detroit Lions this week is like going from facing the 85 Bears to facing a Division III college football program, I believe. Like, that's the kind of gap in talent we're talking about. I mean, the Lions are awful against the pass. Rodgers' ceiling certainly matches that of Tom Brady, and the biggest scare with him is the spread, as the Packers are the biggest favorites this week. But in the world of chasing in GPPs, you don't care about that volatility. In fact, you embrace it, and that ceiling is really high for Rodgers this week against a bad Lions team. And the fact is, even with James Stark serving as a starting running back this week, which should do wonders for the running game since Eddie Lacy's looked terrible this year, they still haven't been able to establish the run much, and that could keep them throwing the ball from start to finish, even if they develop a big lead, because if you can't run the ball, you still got to move the sticks, and that's going to keep Rodgers active, I think, from start to finish. So I really like him this week, and on FanDuel, he's actually $100 more than Tom Brady, so I'm guessing he's owned on probably a quarter of the rosters that Tom Brady is. Something like probably 20 to 25% ownership for Brady, maybe, and significantly less than that for Aaron Rodgers, probably around 5%, just ballparking.
Yeah, and I mean, to get a player of that talent level in this matchup for that cheap, definitely something I'm on board with too. And Blake Bortles, another guy, volume passing attack, the two-headed Allen monster there, Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns. Obviously, we know how big-time upside. Just so happens to be a great matchup as well against a Ravens team that has not been able to stop anyone really at any time for any reason this entire season. So fire up this trio, really, if you want, in this great matchup here.
Yeah, I mean, Bortles gets a defense that can't defend receivers, and he just happens to be one of those quarterbacks that really loves to use his receivers. He's not dinking and dunking with his tight ends and running backs. He's gripping and ripping and throwing it to the Allens this year, and this matchup sets up perfectly. He's averaging 274.1 yards passing per game and just a tick over 2 touchdown passes per game. So even if he just hits the season averages, he's going to pay off his price tag. But I think this week against a soft Ravens defense, in a game that Vegas has the Jaguars as 5.5 point underdogs, which I think is a little bit off, but that's a whole different story. Odds makers have game flow working in favor of the Jaguars this week, and game flow for a team that likes to air it out, that's actually benefits from airing it out against the Ravens because they are better against the run than they are against the pass. Bortles looks like a really high ceiling play to me.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I mean, we've seen Bortles have massive upside even when he's not being efficient. So that volume alone puts him in play. Todd Gurley here, guy who first couple weeks nobody wanted to raise his price. He was just a must play, and there was really no way around it. But finally, his price has been tinkered with a little bit. He's up there. Last week, he was the most expensive running back on FanDuel. Now he's getting up there on DraftKings as well. So for that reason, people are thinking, well, I don't know how much upside's left in Todd Gurley. He's a cash game play, but I won't play him much in tournaments. But I'm still on board, and I know you are as well, with Todd Gurley in tournaments here.
Yeah, and this is a good week for value plays at running back, which should also suppress Todd Gurley's ownership. And obviously you get a star player of Gurley's caliber with suppressed ownership, and you've got a match made in heaven. I mean, you're looking for big upside at low ownership, and Gurley's certainly got unmatched upside at the running back position. He has the highest projected fantasy output at both DraftKings and FanDuel here at Daily Fantasy Cafe. And he's facing a Bears defense that if you just look at the fantasy scoring allowed by them to running backs, you really wouldn't be super impressed. You wouldn't be thrilled with the matchup. But they're giving up 4.6 yards per rush, which is the 6th highest mark in the league. And Gurley's averaging more than an extra yard on top of that. He's averaging 5.6 yards per carry this year. So a guy that's ripping off a first down every 2 runs should have no problem gashing this Bears defense and doing so on a big volume. I mean, there aren't a lot of backs around the league that can boast 20-plus touch floor, basically. I mean, that's what Gurley's getting every week. And Gurley and he can do so at an efficient clip, but do so on volume, which is a nice little combination.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. Next up, we've got DeMarco Murray, guy who last year he was a cash game lock. He was a guy that we looked up to in tournaments. I mean, he had huge upside, et cetera, et cetera. Took him a while to get going in the new offense this year, but finally, he's getting a ton of touches. He's getting catches out of the backfield. He's got a floor and he's got a ceiling, and that's the perfect combination for your GPPs, because even if you have a guy that doesn't give you a big ceiling, a guy like DeMarco Murray is not going to kill you.
Yeah, and the guy's getting touch after touch after touch. Carried the ball 18 or more times in 4 straight contests. During that 4-game run, he's had 18 receptions for 134 yards receiving. So he's also getting included in the passing game, which is big at DraftKings, where you're getting that full point per reception. And he's facing a Dolphins team that was just gashed for 200-plus yard running backs performances by Shady McCoy, former Eagle, and rookie Carlos Williams. So even the presence of Ryan Matthews doesn't really scare me that much, because both backs can get theirs. And against a team that's allowing 142.1 rushing yards per game, I'd say there's plenty of running to be done by DeMarco Murray. And as 6-point favorites, the Eagles have game flow working in their favor too. So everything lining up very nicely for Murray this week.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his in all formats, really. Dez Bryant next. Talking about the quarterback situation, obviously Tony Romo still out. You had the Brandon Weeden experiment, which we all knew was going to fail. The Matt Castle experiment has failed, has had some success. You still don't expect Matt Castle to be consistently good. However, you don't have to be consistently good to get the ball to Dez Bryant. You were talking to me earlier about that touchdown catch. Dez Bryant can catch any ball that is anywhere near his body. So underthrow, overthrow, doesn't matter. Get the ball close to him, and Dez Bryant can pay off for you in tournaments this week.
Yeah, I mean, basically the only reason he's a GPP play as opposed to an all formats play is because of the presence of Matt Castle. Obviously, there's that risk that Castle gets shy and dinks and dunks and dumps it off to Witten and to his backs, Darren McFadden. And actually, at this point, Christine Michael hasn't even really seen the field, so we won't even include him in that. But as long as he's willing to throw the ball a few times in Dez's direction, Dez can go get it. Last week, 5 for 104 and 1, and he has a softer matchup this week against the Bucs. The Bucs are struggling to defend number 1 receivers. They're giving up a lot of fantasy points, 5th most at DraftKings and 7th most at FanDuel. So they aren't doing a good job at defending receivers. And Matt Castle, just go D Brown, cover the eyeballs, and just kind of throw it in Dez's direction, and all will be fine. But there is definitely some boomer bust nature to this pick, because, I mean, anytime you're relying on Matt Castle to get you the football, there is that bust potential. But obviously the upside is huge, or he wouldn't be featured here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then past him, speaking of the Bucs, Mike Evans, who big disappointment 2 weeks ago, not actually a disappointment this week, but if you looked on Twitter, you would have known that. Had a big performance, had some drops, though. Everyone wants to talk about the drops. I don't want to talk about the production he actually did come up with, which was very solid production. And despite Jameis Winston being inaccurate at times, he hasn't thrown a pick in 4 games. So he's at least getting the ball to his receivers, or at least not to the defense. So Mike Evans, a guy that's going to get a bunch of looks, and as we know, he's got big upside.
Yeah, I mean, you can make all you want about the 6 drop passes, but he still reeled in 8 for 150. And the guy missed week 1, was only targeted 3 times in week 2, yet he ranks in the top 20 in targets in the league with 72. Vincent Jackson's expected to miss this week's contest. Even the return of Austin Seferian-Jenkins shouldn't cut into his production too much. Evans is going to be targeted, I'd guess, at least a dozen times. I mean, that's pretty much been like clockwork so far this year. And Morris Claiborne is the type of corner that's going to deter Jameis Winston from throwing in that direction. As Jason pointed out earlier in the week, it is a plus matchup for Mike Evans. And as Football Outsiders points out, Cowboys are just ranked 27th defending number 1 receivers. So gotta like Mike Evans this week. Jameis Winston is making improvements as the season goes along. And as you noted, hasn't turned the ball over. So if the Bucs keep football, that's good for their odds of scoring. I mean, and once you get near the red zone, I like the odds of a 6'5" target like Mike Evans becoming a threat.
Yeah, I mean, hard not to. And then next up, Jordan Matthews, the guy who finally produced this past week. We've been waiting for it. It was never an issue of talent. It was an issue of drop passes, inconsistency. Sam Bradford doing the same, essentially. And finally had his breakout game. now facing another team that can't defend number one wide receivers, and he's the clear-cut option there. There's really no number two that's any good. There's really no number three here. I mean, if you're throwing the ball down the field, it's Jordan Matthews.
Yeah, I mean, when your other receiver getting a ton of snaps is Miles Austin, and you've got guys like Riley Cooper and others playing meaningful snaps. I mean, it is the Jordan Matthews show in that passing attack, and I've been beating the drum for him all week, most of the season even. But this week is perfect. He's facing a Dolphins team that Football Outsiders ranks 32nd defending number one wide receivers, and Matthews is pacing the Eagles in every meaningful category: receptions, targets, receiving yards, tied for the team lead with a couple of touchdown grabs. And Sam Bradford clearly views Matthews as his top receiver, and Bradford's actually, despite all the criticism, playing a little bit better of late. He's passed for 270 or more yards in 4 of his last 5 contests. So if he's going to continue to produce that kind of yardage output, that bodes well for Matthews. And I like that. I like Matthews' odds of getting the best of Brent Grimes in that Miami Dolphins secondary this week.
Yeah, I mean, Brent Grimes definitely an ideal target for opposing receivers. Rob Gronkowski here. He may or may not see low ownership this week. You mentioned here maybe he is, maybe he's not. It doesn't really matter. Recency bias with Gronk a couple times this year even has seen him have a subpar outing because the Patriots won too handily, much like they did last week, where he had 4 for 47, which for most tight ends is pretty good. Obviously, Gronk, not what you're paying for. But
yeah.
In this matchup against the Giants, if they can keep this one close, which they should be able to compete and score some points in this one. Gronk has massive upside against a team that's given up some huge games to much less talented tight ends.
Yeah, when a defense makes Ben Watson look like Rob Gronkowski, it makes very tantalizing fantasy football thoughts run through my head about what Gronk can look like against the Giants defense. I mean, Gronk is in a class of his own at tight end, and the Giants have struggled to stop all tight ends this year, not even just the elite ones that they faced. And they're about to face the most elite tight end probably in the history of the game, if we're being perfectly honest. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about Gronk other than he's phenomenal. He's paired up with Brady. The team has the highest team total on the week. There's just a lot to like here. And even if it turns into a blowout, there are occasions where Belichick just doesn't take his foot off the gas anyway. So I'm not as worried about the blowout factor with a team like the Patriots coached by Belichick as I would be with maybe basically any other team that's more willing to take their foot off the gas and just kind of take the air out of the ball too soon.
Yeah. I mean, it's pun intended. The only way that the Patriots are stopping here is if they stop themselves. Maybe there's a defense out there that can slow them down. I don't see the Giants being that defense. So Gronk with massive upside here. So definitely got to like that. And that's going to wrap things up for the GPP plays this week. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.